So the second French attack on La Haye Sainte is about to commence. The French move. D'Aulon's corps moves more men towards La Haye Sainte, and the second attack commences. Now, the second attack, before the second attack, Napoleon is worried because guess who's arrived? That's everyone's favorite dinner guest. The Prussians have arrived. This is about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. This is the Prussians have arrived. Now, the Allies don't know the Prussians have arrived yet. Prussian messengers are still getting through. The men at La Haye Sainte won't find out until about 5:30, 6 o'clock in the afternoon. So this is literally Napoleon saying, don't worry about them, they're on the moon. Napoleon sends some troops to delay the Prussians, and he's now focused on this. Really amps up his attacks on La Haye Sainte. He's like, we got to break it. We got to bust this thing wide open and attack the Allied center. So Napoleon sends a man to scout La Haye Sainte. Napoleon thinks there's a division defending La Haye Sainte. There's not. There's an understrength battalion with a shattered brigade nearby. A brigade with basically a regiment who's now skirmishing and a regiment who's in a permanent square. So he sends a cuirassier. The cuirassier just rides up to La Haye Sainte and starts having a look. And the men in La Haye Sainte just sort of look at him and go, okay, that's obviously a deserter. He wants to live. And the man just starts bolting away, and before anyone can react, he's gone. So, whoops. You're not supposed to let scouts just look at your position unless they do what this man did. And he went up to Napoleon and he said, yeah, there's a division there. I can't say, there has to be a division there. So, yeah. There wasn't, but Napoleon thought there was. And so he says to D'Aulon, my name is Dylan, which makes D'Aulon a weird thing for me to say, but D'Aulon, take your corps and clear the center for me. Clear out the center. We're advancing on La Haye Sainte. And to facilitate this, he has La Haye Sainte bombarded to hell. The original, again, I've already talked about, like, you can't shell La Haye Sainte out. There's not enough time. Especially now that time is of the essence. He bombs it to crap. Baring actually says that even the most senior men in his unit were pretty terrified by this bombardment. Well, not terrified, but off-put. I mean, if you're behind the walls, you're pretty safe. But it was extremely off-putting to have round shot and friggin' exploding howitzers going off all around you. Cannonballs don't explode. Remember, PSA: cannonballs don't explode. Howitzers have carcass shot that does sort of explode it sort of explodes and it's fire everywhere. And howitzers can also fire some kind of exploding rounds. The British at this point have shrapnel, named after Colonel Shrapnel, or Major Shrapnel, or Captain Shrapnel. The man's name was Shrapnel. And the French have been trying to get their hands on this for friggin' a decade now, and they haven't got it yet. So even round shot whizzing over your friggin' head is scary. So there's bombardment and an infantry assault. So I mentioned our man Mueller. Mueller is up on the roof with his loaders, and he sees a battalion coming towards the kitchen garden. The kitchen garden, remember, it's defended by a couple of men. This is the back door. This is the escape route. And the 10 men defending the hedgerow, 10 men with a corporal, or a corporal and 10 men. I'm more inclined to say 10 men and a corporal, but it's not very clear. Defending this hedgerow. And it is here that we see the best example of small unit tactics of the Napoleonic Wars. The British had a very good light infantry system with a 2-man pair. I'll put some... I'm trying to animate stuff. If it's not animated, it'll just be still photos. But essentially, you had a forward and a rear man. The forward man is the one who would be doing the shooting. He would be taking aim and firing his rifle. And after he fires his rifle, he will either stay where he is, and his friend will advance to become the new forward man while he reloads and covers him. If he thinks that the pair should retreat, he will run behind the other man. So these two men had to know each other quite well. They had to have a good relationship, and they had to have the same sort of instincts. And British light infantry actually get this. British light infantry developed this sort of bond of camaraderie. You would normally have the same two men in the pair, and these men would sort of know one another. They would sort of know how they think. And they would defend one another in this sort of formation, and that was going on in the kitchen garden until a friggin' French battalion showed up. And you can have 10 men do all the formations you want. You're not going to stop the battalion, but Mueller can. Mueller simply took aim and killed the battalion commander, killed the colonel or lieutenant colonel. And that was it. That's what I said before. One man's death shattered a battalion. The battalion sort of melted away and didn't attack the rear of the farmhouse. Now, if they did attack, men would simply have been brought from the courtyard to defend. They wouldn't have actually finished an assault, but it would have taken away men from the other positions. So what were the other positions? Well, there are three major other positions we're going to talk about. The barn, the loopholes, and the front gate. So the gate itself was actually quite well defended. The enemy never really got to the gate until later on, so we don't worry about the gate right now. But it was a major fighting area. The loopholes. Now, the British had made some loopholes, and it was actually quite good that they didn't make too many more, because the loopholes from now on are no one's ground at all. The British would shove their rifles through and fire, and then a French musket would come through and fire. And if the French take the loopholes for any amount of time, then you have to abandon the courtyard. You have to abandon La Haye-Sainte if the loopholes fall, because they can just freaking pour fire into the whole courtyard. You can't fight from then on. So loopholes are probably the second most critical place to defend. And the defense of loopholes is actually done a lot by wounded men who end up getting more wounded. So Lindau, our man Lindau, is at the loopholes. He's also at the barn, which we'll talk about next. And Lindau describes two things. One is he's got his rifle, because of course he's a rifleman. He's got his rifle through, and he gets a shot off on a Frenchman, and the Frenchman grabs his rifle, and he can't get it out of his hands, and he turns to his mate and he says, "This dog's grabbed my rifle," or he says it in German. Well, he actually would have said it in English, because they of course spoke English, but he would have said it with a German accent. "This dog is my rifle." I can't do a German accent. And so his mate says, "I've got a bullet," and shoves the rifle beside his and kills the Frenchman. And then his friend gets his rifle grabbed, so he puts the bayonet on, and our man Lindau does in a Frenchman. And Lindau is then later on. This is during the third attack, but I'll mention it now, just to show how insane the fighting at the loopholes was. He has his right shoulder tuft shot off, so a little bit of wood with a bit of wool on it that gets shot off, and his rifle is actually shattered. The lock. I'll put a picture up there. The lock on his rifle is hit by a musket ball and shattered. So what happens is Lindau shoves his rifle through a loophole. The Frenchman shoves a musket through. He sort of panics and gets out of the way, kills the Frenchman, and then the Frenchman's bullet takes out the lock on his rifle. So that's how freaking brutal it was. Funny story. Lindau then notices that probably one of the best marksmen in the company besides Mueller is mortally wounded with his guts hanging out near the pond. Pond is important. Everything's interlaced, but the pond is very important. And so Lindau sees the man near the pond, and he knows this man has one of the most accurate, beautiful rifles in the whole battalion. So he sort of crawls over there, and he's like, "You're not going to need it, mate. You are dying." And the man actually had a death grip on the rifle. He sort of he would not give it up to Lindau, so Lindau eventually had to find another rifle. Okay, so that's Lindau. Remember, that happened during the second part. So the first part, Lindau's defending the loopholes. The second part is when he loses his rifle, sorry. So, the third and most important critical piece of defense of La Haye-Sainte was the barn. The barn did not have any doors. There was a makeshift barricade, which is basically just something to step over. And the French were about to improve it. The French came on the barn hard. The barn was the main French area of attack. They streamed into the barn. And Lindau actually came away from the loopholes to defend the barn. And Lieutenant Graham, jeez, I promoted him twice. Lieutenant Graham actually was also defending the barn with his sword, which makes me think, again, left hand was injured, not right. And they kill so many Frenchmen, 17 to 20 Frenchmen get killed in such a short period of time that they actually use them as a barricade. And you can see here in the Warlord Games box set, you get those dead French barricades. Those aren't just Warlord Games being gruesome. That's them doing their research. They're a fantastic company. Everyone should support Warlord Games. They're utterly fantastic. They're beautiful, beautiful miniatures. I have some of their... I didn't intend to show this, but I have some of their Waterloo French troops there. They're beautiful miniatures. Warlord's fantastic. Anyway, the King's German Legion actually used dead French bodies to barricade the barn and sort of fortify it. So the more... Again, there's a catch-22 again. The more the French attack the weak point, the better the defense becomes, because their bodies literally get used in the defense. But the British are using part of their 60 rounds all the time. By the second attack, they're down to about 40. At the end of the second attack, you're looking at 10 rounds a man. And remember, without ammunition, La Haye Sainte is totally useless. It's just, it can be isolated, surrounded, and bypassed. So ammunition is key. So those are the big three. And then something happens. Lindau remains at the barn and sort of he defends it with a few men. And the French come on, as they do, in the same old style as Picton says. And, okay. Yeah, French come on, but they're not coming on that strong. Okay, there's smoke in the air as usual because you're firing a lot of black powder muskets. Doesn't smell like black powder smoke. And taste doesn't have that salty taste of black powder smoke because it's made from animal dung. But doesn't taste like saltpeter and that sort of stuff. Oh, the barn was on fire. The French had actually set the barn on fire. And this was a very, very good move on the French part. Again, this is something you can do in sharp practice. You can set buildings on fire. And you should always buy at least one unit or two. I think you get two units can have it for 1 point. Always give your men tinder boxes so you can burn buildings because it's just fun. So the French set the barn on fire. And luckily for the British, they had taken all the straw out. If the straw was in the barn, that would have been the end of La Haye Sainte. But because the straw wasn't in the barn, it had been taken out for bedding and burning. The barn was okay. It was on fire. Lindau and a few other men went over and got their 95th Rifleman caps there and their Shakos there. I got to make sure I don't just go there because it's there's the cap, there's the Shako, and they got their uniform. They couldn't put it out. They didn't have the right tools to put it out. They didn't have any. They had their cups. They didn't have any cooking equipment. All the stuff that was in the kitchens of the barn were looted. The kitchens of the farmhouse, were looted by the men who came before them. And so this fire was a problem, but it wasn't an immediate problem. If it spread to the farmhouse, that would be a huge problem. If it spread to the farmhouse, Bowring said that he would automatically just retreat because the only line of retreat Bowring has is the kitchen garden. Through the house, through the kitchen, out the garden, and back to friendly lines. He can't go through the front door because it's way too exposed. So if they lose the barn, if the barn fire spreads to the kitchen, to the house, they have to retreat. So it's not a problem right now, but it's going to be a big problem if it gets any worse. So and of course, the building being on fire actually does a little bit of reprieve for the King's German Legion because the French aren't going to attack it while it's on fire. So the barn is ablaze. The kitchen may start to catch fire. The loopholes are contested and being fought over like mad. The front gate is holding up for now. And von Umpteder and his 5th King's German Legion Battalion is stuck out in the middle of nowhere being attacked by cuirassiers. How is it going to end? Find out next time in the 3rd assault on La Haye Sainte.